Hello and welcome to the Aquarius Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Reed. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by OASE, makers of fine filtration products like the Biomaster canister filter and BioPlus internal filters. Let's talk about the Biomaster for a moment here. With its removable pre-filter cleaning system, integrated heater option, and ultra whisper quiet technology, what is not to love about this filter? If you're in the market for a new canister filter, you owe it to yourself and your fish to check out the OASE Biomaster canister filter. Use the links in the show notes and check out these great products. Now, on to the interview. Today's date is Thursday, November 14th, 2019. My guest today is Erik Hunter. Erik is the founder of IND Creations. Erik and I are going to talk all about his exciting new creation, the Af4 Automated Frozen Fish Food Feeder. So Erik, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Randy.
I did that in one take. I did the Af4 Automated Frozen Fish Food Feeder. Oh, I just did it again. Wow, I'm getting pretty good at that.
We might need a new spokesperson here, because that takes me usually 2 or 3 tries.
There you go. So, Erik, you are on to talk about this new, super cool, exciting thing. You've got a Kickstarter campaign for it. It is the aquarium industry's first automated frozen fish food feeder. So that is super awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this has been something that I know a lot of people have been needing for quite a while, and there just hasn't been an option for anybody.
All right, so let's leave that as a teaser. Before we get into the actual automated frozen fish food feeder, let's find out, who is Erik Hunter. Tell me about your journey, your Aquarius journey in the hobby. And most of my listeners are going to be freshwater, right? So this is a freshwater podcast. So I'm kind of crossing over to the other side here. I'm on the light side because I prefer the dark side better than the light side. So I'm gonna talk to the Alliance right now, or I'm gonna talk to the Rebels, and we're gonna find out from Mr. Saltwater. Tell me about your journey in the hobby.
Wait. So I'm the dark side?
No, I'm the dark side. Dark side's the cool side. You're the.
Okay. All right, I'm cool with that too. I like both sides. All right. So basically, my journey through aquariums started pretty much when I moved to San Diego around 2001. I started with one small tank, and I kind of dove straight into saltwater. I'd come from like a free diving, scuba diving kind of background, and those are the type of fish I always saw. So I always thought, these are amazing. How I can have this in my house. Okay. So I started with one small tank, which quickly grew into like 3 to 4 tanks. I had a small garage business for a while, which was rough when I was in my early 20s to try and run that and go to school. So that fell through. But
would you mind unpacking a little bit on what that business was and kind of what you were doing?
Sure. So in San Diego, there's probably 10, 15 various aquarium stores. There's a pretty good community of aquarists down here. And I wanted to try and serve that community by basically cleaning tanks and offering like a quarantine service for the new fish, and kind of just a la carte deal where they didn't have to go to a shop. I'd bring everything to them, and I thought it was a good idea at the time. I think my head wasn't in it. I was trying to go to school at the same time, and kind of fell through. But that was my goal there. I know other people have made that work, but I wasn't able to.
Do you find that, so on I guess on the saltwater side of things, is the quarantine process taken a bit more seriously than perhaps on the freshwater side? Like, and I don't mean to say that freshwater people don't set up quarantine tanks and, use, medications. Aquarium Co-op is very famous for promoting the quarantine trio for any new fish before you introduce them into your community tank. But I've never heard anybody go so far as to say, like, I need somebody else to QT my fish before I bring it into my system.
I would say there are some very, very, very strong feelings about quarantining. I'm going to just come out and say that I have never been, on my personal tanks, a fan of quarantining. I kind of feel like it stresses the fish out. So I try and pick out healthy fish and just put them into a healthy environment, not overcrowded. So that's always been my plan. There are some people that would just absolutely go on a tirade about that I do things. There's a lot of people that do the same thing I do, but there's definitely a crowd of people that refuse to. They basically refuse to put anything in their tank that hasn't been observed for like a month. in a different tank.
And now, so let me phrase it this way: from a monetary, like, retail price standpoint, I feel like the average purchase price of a freshwater fish in a retail store, a community fish, you're probably looking between $2 to $3 up to like 15. I would say is going to be kind of your top of the common fish, and then anything above 15 is going to be like a real specialty pleco or just something like really oddball. Where's that price bracket for saltwater?
So the saltwater definitely it gets real pricey. There you can get like some of the most beginner like starter fish for under $10. The average fish is probably between $10 and $100, depending what you want. They have fish that are thousands of dollars. That they're a little bit more rare. They're very pretty, but I can't remember what it is, but like a gem tang or something sells for like $2,000 regularly. Yeah, and so people that have really, really nice collections are worried about putting a fish that's infested with parasites with all their other fish and losing 75% of what they have. So yeah, I would definitely say the average price for a saltwater fish is probably between $30 and $50.
Okay, and then so there's the fish price, but then also in saltwater it's the corals and the like the hard and the soft corals, right? That those also could be susceptible to anything brought in by a new fish as well, potentially.
Typically, no.
Oh, okay.
Typically, the things that affect corals come from other corals. So there's a different little process. You can dip corals a lot better than you can with fish. You can do some like quick dip processes to fish that will help get rid of some of the parasites. But for the most part, if somebody really, really, really wants to quarantine it, they're spending at least a couple weeks to a month in a separate tank before they put it in their main tank. Which I didn't realize that wasn't a big part of freshwater keeping.
The like actually quarantining fish.
Yeah.
No, I mean it is, but not to the extent of where you could potentially prop up and support a business of actually offering that as a service. Like, I don't think I've ever actually heard of anybody doing that in the freshwater side of things. But once you start racking up the price of somebody's 100-gallon saltwater display tank and the potential like total price of all the fish in there, I could definitely see why that would justify and where like the market may actually dictate and say, yeah, that's a thing, that's a service that somebody may want to do, is actually have somebody else quarantine their fish for an extended period of time. Because most of the time, I mean, I'm not the best at quarantining. I'm very impatient and I like to just kind of add fish to my system. Not with like the discus that I'm working on right now in the fish room, but like in a community tank. I like to buy from my own store, which is Aquarium Co-op, and I know that we're already doing the quarantine where we are doing medications on fish that we do bring in, and we do have longer observation periods and all sorts of stuff like that. So I think to your point and kind of your philosophy, it's buying the healthier fish, going to reputable places. But I would say, yeah, like most freshwater people, if they do a quarantine, they'll set something up, or if they have a quarantine tank, maybe they'll do like a week or two. But I'd really struggle to find somebody that would go beyond like 2 weeks on the freshwater side of things.
That's really awesome that you guys do that. It is tough finding a retailer that does everything you just said you guys do. At least in San Diego, a lot of them will be this fish was in Fiji a week ago, and now here it is for sale. So they definitely don't hold on to them as long. They don't. Sometimes you'll see like a hospital tank at the store, but for the most part, they're just kind of ocean wholesaler retailer.
Oh wow!
And your tank.
Oh yeah. We have a whole back room is dedicated to. It's actually the quarantine room, where all the fish that process through our store go into the QT room and get the med trio, and they're put under observation, salts, all sorts of good stuff to make sure that we're setting people up to be successful in the hobby. Because that's one of the worst things you can do is sell somebody a fish that may or may not be sick, and then all of a sudden you take it home, the entire community tank gets wiped out, and then you've potentially just lost a family from the hobby. Or an individual aquarist from the hobby because they had such a bad experience. And from what I hear, the newer stores that are opening are adopting that philosophy and are really investing in quarantine rooms and quarantining their livestock and treating them with things like salts and medications to make sure that their customers are getting that that better fish. And if that means a neon tetra sells for 50 cents more, I think customers they want that quality. Like, we're at a point in consumerism where farm to table and all of these other facets of our life where people are willing to pay a little bit more for quality and knowing that they're getting a better product. I'm not talking Rolls Royce prices, but we're willing to spend a little bit more for a little bit of a higher quality, or a lot higher quality.
I totally agree with that. I hope that's where everything's going down here as well, at least on the saltwater side. It should be that way. Like if all the stores did the way that you guys do it, that I would have thought to offer quarantining fish as my own little side service. And I think that's the way it should be done.
Yeah, I think what's kind of interesting about this conversation right now, and I've talked to Sean Hale, who puts on Aquashella, and we've talked about how the blending of saltwater and freshwater, while the similarities is basically like a fish in water in a glass box, but there's so many differences. And when you tend to see these conventions where both salt and freshwater are represented, it's like oil and water. Like they don't mix. There's not a whole lot of like crossover. There's very few people that are fully versed in saltwater and fully versed in freshwater. So while from the outside appearance, people are like, oh, that's the same hobby. You have these kinds of conversations, and it's like, oh, we really don't talk. Like we're not in the same forums, and it's it takes a very unique person that's going to have a lot of experience in freshwater and a lot of experience in saltwater.
No, I 100% agree with that statement. Just myself in marketing this the AF4, I've found myself naturally gravitating back to all the saltwater niches because that's what I know. And I've been seeing these really pretty planted tanks, and I'm just like, where do I even begin? Because I think that's what if I started a freshwater tank, I would want a really beautiful planted tank. And I just in saltwater, you're trying your hardest to eliminate all the plants for the most part. But
that's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the hook. Like, the 1980s and 1990s 55-gallon Oscar tank with some fake plants. Like, yeah. While I love Oscars, people that listen to this podcast know that I love Oscars and they hold a special place in my heart. That tank is not going to captivate and bring in nearly as many people new into the hobby as a 20-gallon cube or something that is just planted up to the brim with a bunch of easy to grow, low maintenance, low need plants like an Anubias or Vallisneria. Like I'm throwing out all these freshwater plant species at you right now, and you're like, I don't know what that is, but exactly. Crypts and whatnot. But you can make beautiful aquascapes. Couple pieces of stone, couple placed pieces of driftwood, a minimal amount of kind of like a nano species for some bright flashing color, and that small tank is going to be so much more captivating and draw people into the hobby than our beloved brute of an Oscar swimming through his Roman Colosseum, or hovering above the
skull,
hovering. And I had the little circular Roman Colosseum thing at one point in one of my tanks.
So did I. I had one in the saltwater tank.
That's so good, man. So that's like the Atlantis thing going on. But yeah, so I feel like if people just had like the Takashi Amano, that's one of like the godfathers of this Iwagumi style of Japanese aquascaping, where it very much reminds me of the fields of Rohan in The Lord of the Rings. Like if you had his book on your coffee table, you would just instantly like draw people in and captivate them, and they'd be like, I want that in my house. Like that thing is living artwork. That's awesome.
So let me ask you a quick question about planted tanks, since I don't really know anything about planted tanks.
How much? You're going to ask me a question. Here we go.
Well, this should be an easy one, I think. How much pruning is involved on like a weekly basis with that sort of system?
I think so it's going to depend. So first off, if you are a low tech or a high tech, and typically the difference between a low tech and a high tech will be the introduction of CO2 and a higher light with fertilizers. So there are plants where they can get enough nutrients to survive and slowly grow with a very basic run-of-the-mill LED and just kind of the leftover, like the leftover minerals or whatever it may be that's being left over from extra feedings or fish feces or whatnot. So they can get nutrients from that in the water. Your high-tech tanks where you are going to have plant species that are far more demanding, and they are going to need supplemental introduction of fertilizers, so like nitrogen and phosphate and iron and all of that, and they're actually going to need CO2 injected into the system. That's going to be that's going to require more pruning because those plants, they need that to survive, and then they'll tend to thrive. And so like your carpeting plants where people will plant like a dwarf baby tears. That's one example of like this real grows low to the ground and looks really, really beautiful in a well manicured aquascape tank. But from my understanding, I've never had one of those tanks, but those tanks do need to be manicured, fairly often, like on a weekly basis, to make sure you've got that carpet at that right level. There's a thing called dwarf hairgrass that I've actually had that in one of my tanks that it was a high tech injecting CO2, and that stuff it can grow fairly tall. I think at some point without maintaining it, I got it up to 6 inches, and it probably would have continued to grow. But typically when you see it, it's like this nice 2-inch kind of 2 inches kind of tall, kind of a carpet, like this beautiful carpet that just kind of flows on the very bottom of the tank. So those you'll probably be manicuring your tank once a week. Where another species like a Vallisneria, it will cast out runners. It's a very tall, long, wispy, very easy to grow, low needs plant. Something like that, you might be able to go in your low-tech planted tank and not have to prune or trim or pull any runners out for, I don't know, a month or two.
Okay. Well, I mean, if only we could get the light side and the dark side to talk a little more, because what you're describing is very similar to a high-end coral tank, like all the different gadgets to make everything work and the maintenance required. And it's part of why people love what the reward of looking at it is. All the work they put into it is a payoff, is how beautiful it is. And it's like what you just described to me in different words sounds very similar to like a high-end coral tank.
Yeah, and I'm sure that like even on the low-tech side, more so on the high-tech side, if you have an imbalance of those nutrients, if you've got too much light, if you have too many nutrients, if you've got more nutrients, less light, more light, less nutrients, you then have algae, blackbeard algae, hair algae, all of these things, and that's where your cleaner crew comes in, your Amano shrimp, cherry shrimp, nerite snails, all sorts of like little critters, and fish as well, Florida flagfish, although they can be kind of rough sometimes, pandagoras, some gobies, you have your little crew in there to help keep down that algae. So, I would assume that there's probably a parallel in corals. Like there's going to be some unwanted entrance into a coral atmosphere or a coral tank, just like with a planted tank. So it is certainly not all, freshwater, bells and whistles and roses and all that. Like, it's not some easy thing, because if you get an imbalance wrong, if you're running too much daylight, if you're not running enough nutrients, you can have an algae explosion. And some people really like the look of algae. If kind of manicured and kept to, its own, if you kind of manage the algae in a certain way, it can look cool in and of itself. But a lot of times, like if you start getting that wispy algae on your val or your crinum or any of these other plants, you're like, that just kind of looks like crap. And a person new to the hobby may come into your house and be like, oh my god, that's a beautiful planted tank, that looks awesome. But you see all those imperfections, and I would have to imagine that the saltwater side of thing probably has that too.
It's the same. Yeah, it's totally the same thing. We've got our pests and things that just grow like weeds basically, and unfortunately drown out the things that you spend so much time on.
Yeah. One comment that Sean made, I don't know if he made it while I interviewed him, but one of the draws and what he's really liking about the freshwater side of things, because he works for Fritz, and that's a big provider of saltwater salt and all the other fun stuff that Fritz provides, is that not having like an actinic, is that the term, the actinic light?
Yeah, like the blue lighting.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So actually having a tank in your front room that doesn't have that blue lighting, makes it a much more enjoyable space, where that blue lighting can kind of be a little bit, off-putting at times. And I don't think his wife was a big fan of that, where, with a planted tank, he was able to have one in the front room, have that lighting, have the normal LED lighting, and it was all perfectly fine, because it's just, normal LED lighting for the most part.
Yeah, that is a good point, because I definitely put a decent amount of work into shielding the blue light from like basically over coverage on the tank, because it is annoying to look at that blue light, and if you're anywhere below the light, you see it. It's like, that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't want you to fully convert over, because you have to keep your saltwater. You have to keep your saltwater chops for your product, right? Because you've got a strong demand for something like this, which we'll dive into. But I hope after this conversation, Matt, I can get you to go down and pick up a little cube tank or something, pick up like a little 15 or 20 gallon cube tank, and get yourself a planted tank going.
That is definitely on the list. So right now I've been pouring all myself into this product, but that is definitely on there.
So let's talk about the product then. I guess at what point in your hobbyist career did this idea come up?
I've had this idea in some form for a long time. Probably the first time I had to leave for longer than 5 days. I was like, oh, I wonder. Let me go look for like automated frozen fish food feeder, and I found nothing. And so I searched a little bit more, and there's several DIY solutions out there. I never had the circumstance where I could actually. Most of them involve a mini like dorm fridge, and I never had the space to really install that inside a cabinet to make the system work. So basically, this stemmed for me from vacations, and not having to get somebody to. I've always had fish that refuse to eat the dry food. I don't know if that's something that ever happens in freshwater.
Yeah, that was my next question. Yeah, is how prominent is the need to have frozen food diets in saltwater versus what of freshwater?
Almost all the fish in saltwater can be trained to take pellets, but it can be fish by fish. Like some fish, you might be able to get to do it. Some fish refuse no matter how hard you try. And so the only solution before was to get some people to come over to your house and say, hey, this is how you do it. Drop this in, and then leave this here because the next person's going to come on Wednesday. And is always just asking a bunch of favors of your friends and family to come over and help you take care of the tank. And sometimes I've actually had a couple fish die while I've been gone, which is always sad, especially like with some of these fish that you really care about and they get personalities. They're pets. There are pets. And so when you leave for a week and you come back and you see one of them just sitting on the bottom, and you just get really disappointed in yourself. So I've been trying to make this work for quite a while. This last year actually is when it really kicked into gear. I went on vacation. It was a 2-week vacation. I had every sort of automation you can have for your tank, like auto top offs, auto water changes. It was a really nice tank, and had a system of friends coming over to feed it. And one of the guys had to cancel like 4 days in a row, and I didn't have anybody. I was at a wedding and a bachelor party, like 2-week vacation, and I wasn't able to pull the strings to get somebody to come over. And I was like, well, I just hope that when I get back, it's still okay. It was my favorite fish. It was a copper band butterfly, which actually eat one of the biggest pests in reef aquariums, which is the Aptasia anemone, and they just grow like wildfire. And it's really hard to get rid of those. And so this guy ate all of them. So my tank was completely clean. It's a really beautiful fish. And when I came back, that was the one fish that had died and the one fish that I knew would only eat frozen. So I really started just scouring the internet looking for how can I make something small enough where I can put it on my tank and actually have a reliable solution. And I've done tests and tests and tests and gotten to the point where I have this, it's a 4-inch by 4-inch by 3.5-inch cube that's capable of keeping the food frozen as long as you have it plugged in. So if you leave for a week, if you leave for 2 weeks, you can keep your tank fed with this device and not have to worry about your neighbor coming into the house or paying somebody from the fish store. Because I know some fish stores in San Diego will do like basically tank sitting while you're gone, and they charge I think like $40 or $50 a day.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so basically one vacation you'll pay for this unit. So yeah, that's where this started for me, and I'm happy to finally be to a point where I can share it with everybody that has a similar story to mine. And additionally, there's some different species of fish that need to eat like 3 times a day. I don't know is there something like that in the freshwater?
Yeah, so that's kind of one of my questions is, I recently went to Peru in August on a fish collecting trip. I set up some auto feeders, but a few of my tanks didn't have an auto feeder. I've got 40 some odd tanks in my fish room, maybe 35.
Wow.
So I was able to get like 6 or 7 of my auto feeders set up on like the really heavily stocked tanks. And then the other ones with some, a couple pairs of angelfish here and there and some various other species that I keep. I didn't end up losing any over like a 2.5 week period. And I kind of feel like on the freshwater side of things, it sounds like fish can go a little bit longer without eating than on the saltwater side of things. So, and that's clearly, you needing to come up with this kind of solution with, you losing one of your beloved fish, from a, what kind of fish will only eat, frozen and like be very, very stubborn on taking pellets. I brought back, some wild discus. Are you familiar with the discus?
I know what they look like. I
Okay.
would not know any of the species.
Yeah, no worries. It's like the one discus genus with maybe like 2 or 3 species underneath, but then there's all sorts of controversy on, is it just one species or is it 3? Anyway, awesome fish. That's basically what I'm going to dedicate my fish room to, is just breeding out these wild discus and one variety of a domestic, kind of designer discus. But yeah, so I brought these guys back, and wild fish, discus in particular, are typically known to be picky, like notoriously picky when it comes to eating food. And so I got back, immediately ordered live California blackworms. So I got those, and I was able to get them to eat live California blackworms. And it's like, that's not nearly the type of nutrition profile that they need. You need to try to get them over onto frozen cubes, and then from frozen, you can try to get them live, frozen, and then on a prepared food, which the prepared foods are going to have, basically all of the, all the nutrients and that protein and fat and that whole profile that they need to really thrive. And so got them on frozen bloodworms, and then luckily I was able to get them over to some Extreme Krill Flake, which is really, really awesome stuff. So a free plug for Extreme, who I've had on the podcast, just a fantastic food. But so like a discus, those are notoriously, especially wild, those are notoriously picky. Pea puffers, those guys, very, very popular in, in like a smaller tank, smaller community tanks. They can be a little bit ornery, but those guys are notoriously picky. Frozen bloodworms is like one of the few foods that they'll actually take. Seems like they're doing pretty well on Hikari's new Vibrobites, because it has that, it looks like a bloodworm. It has a really erratic way it falls through the water column. I'm sure there's probably some people out there listening to this right now that are yelling at me. There's probably a couple more notoriously picky fish in the freshwater side that will only take frozen cubes, but for the most part, we've got a lot of tank raised fish in the hobby. So they're all coming. They're all eating prepared foods. They're pretty much brought up as fry, probably baby brine shrimp, and then it's 1 or 2 a days that they don't get any baby brine shrimp, and when they're big enough, it's okay. Now you're going to eat this flake or this prepared food, and then they just they make that transition or they die. But most things in the hobby will get down on prepared foods.
Well, that's good. Actually, when you were just talking about that, I had a couple people contact me that are fish breeders that have said, "Well, can I buy this right now?" Basically, because it takes a lot of I guess time and effort to feed small quantities to the fry of these young fish. And like you said, like the younger fish sometimes will only eat things that look like what they're supposed to eat. They won't eat the pellets right away. Yeah.
Now that being said, that reminds me of, yes, like for me, this application of this frozen feeder is, if you're trying to do a breeding operation, if you're trying to get, if you're really trying to churn and really fatten up, a certain breeding pair or a breeding colony, or you've got fry and they'll only take frozen baby brine shrimp or whatever it may be, having something like this on the freshwater side of things, absolutely, like all day long. If you can go to work, do your 8-hour day, and know that your fish are going to get fed every 3 hours like you want them to, like that is a home run. There's a fish called the rainbow fish, some Bosemani rainbow fish that I was breeding, that I basically had to take golden pearls, which you're familiar with on the saltwater side. I think it was like the 50 micron golden pearls. These things, you'll get like 100, 200 fry, but they'll only take incredibly small food like that, and you have to feed them every 2 or 3 hours. So you're taking an Eheim auto feeder, you're putting a piece of tape over the port, and you're trying to dial it in just so you get like this little fraction of a golden pearl amount fall into the tank. And so it ends up being this real ridiculous process, but like that's the only way you can really be successful until they grow, 2 or 3 weeks later, they're then large enough to take baby brine shrimp.
Yeah, no, that's something that we can definitely answer that need with this, and that we actually on that, the standard wheel fits the full size cubes, but it's interchangeable wheels that go inside your carousels. We have you can feed as many as 20 feedings instead of just the 7 from the one unit, and it's like, I don't know, like a quarter of a standard size cube, and you can even put less than that in the individual little slots.
So I see half cubes, quarter cubes. Now, are those, you're going to take a Hikari BioPure bloodworm cube and like the hobbyist cuts them up themselves, or in the saltwater side, do you tend to see half cubes and quarter cubes being sold prepackaged?
No, you got to. They're sold just same as freshwater, basically.
Okay.
it's the same size cubes. They're just different ingredients for the most part. Some I know people do feed bloodworms on the saltwater side as well. So the standard size, we're actually going to make a cutter to make it a little cleaner and more uniform, so you don't have to get out a cutting board and one of your kitchen knives or whatever you use. So we're going to make a cutter to cut it uniform sizes. And we're also going to make...
That would be super helpful. Even if you didn't purchase this, I would for sure get that cutter from you, because you don't always need to feed a full cube. And it's like busting out your knife and the blade turns and there goes your tip of your finger.
Yeah, or when you chop it, the food flies everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's something that we're selling with this. We're going to also sell separately as well, like you just said. Additionally, we're going to make basically ice cube trays. Some people like to make their own food that are for the different size wheels. So we'll have one for the full size, the mid size, and the small size.
Nice.
So you can brew your own. So I've never done this. My wife would never let me have all these raw fish ingredients in our kitchen, but there are a lot of people that do this, and they basically make all their own fish food, which is awesome. So this is a way to accommodate that crowd, so they don't have to cut them. They're just already pre-sized to fit into the different sizes of the wheel.
Yeah, no, that's very awesome. Are you going to go silicone on the ice cube trays or do the hard plastic?
No, silicone, so it's easy to push them out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I did. I made frozen beef heart before, like years and years ago for my Oscars, and my mom. It was like 2001 or 2002. My mom was not happy with me for using her Cuisinart to make beef heart in the kitchen.
Yep. I can already see how that played out.
Can you talk to me a bit more about like the design process and iterations, and break it down like you're talking to a sixth grader? Like the cooling technology without giving away too many of the trade secrets, and like help us kind of understand like how this thing works and how you from the drawing board, like how you iterated on this.
Okay, yeah, sure. So like I said earlier, I started with just Google searches and seeing what options were out there. And in trying to stumble upon some sort of do-it-yourself method, which is I do a lot of, I found something called the thermoelectric cooler, which they come in various sizes and powers, and they're used in things like wine coolers and various other places, applications for them. But I discovered that if you use them the right way, you can get a well below freezing temperature. So basically the way it works is, I'll just touch on this real quick. You run electricity through this thermoelectric cooler. It's a tech. One side gets super hot, the other side gets super cold. And the colder you keep the hot side, the colder the cold side gets. So what I did was I just kept tweaking that hot side until I got it to the point where the cold side was able to maintain a significantly below freezing level for a small chamber. It will only work in a small chamber. Otherwise, you need a full-size refrigerator. But so I found that. I started toying with the housings for that. I got into 3D printing specifically for this product, which has been an adventure in itself. And my daughter loves all the toys I get to make for her. Nice. My wife does not love all the plastic around the house, but it's a good trade-off. So yeah, I was able to make prototype after prototype after prototype for myself until I finally got to a design where I was like, this is ready. And which is something that wasn't available to someone like me before. Like if I had this idea, I'd have to stitch some styrofoam together, and it just would never really get to a point where I could show this off to the world and say, hey, this is something that everyone can use and everyone can benefit from. So once I got the cooling side of it down, I started getting into how are we going to make this so that it's reliable, and what's the best way to feed. So I've sourced a very accurate motor that's able to turn the wheel. It's able to positionally remember exactly where the food is in the feeder. So that way you can keep the unit sealed, because part of keeping it cold is keeping it sealed. Mm-hmm. And so it has a trap door essentially that it will move a piece of food to that trap door and then seal it up again. And it'll do that basically as you program it, which the programming, to be honest, I didn't do that myself. My brother, Drake Hunter, is a programmer, and he was able to to do all that for me and exactly how I wanted it. So I'm very fortunate that he was able to help me out with this, because that's something that it would have taken me another year to learn the programming.
So far, this is pretty impressive. Like, two brothers, one's like the mechanical engineer design guy, and the other one's a computer programmer. That's like, between the two of you, you could probably like take over the world and build all sorts of crazy machinery.
I tried to tell him that, and he doesn't want any credit for this. I just, in what I did right now is more than he's asked for. But yeah, he's been amazing throughout.
That's awesome. That's so cool, man.
Yeah, no, I'm really fortunate that he was there for me, because that would have cost, to pay somebody to do that for me would have cost a ton of money, or to teach myself how to do it would have been at least a year of learning, and it still probably wouldn't be as good as he was able to do it. So basically, yeah, we programmed a control unit that you're able. For my prototype, I don't have the touch screen dialed in, but that's something when we go to mass production, every manufacturer I've talked to said, "Oh, no problem, we can port what you've done over to a touch screen." But that's the goal, is a touch screen controller that will display the internal temperature, so you know that the unit's functioning. It'll display how many cubes you have left, so basically how many feeds, and it'll also allow you to schedule exactly how you want to feed. If you want to feed at 11 a.m., 1 p.m., 5 p.m., you can set all that up. If you want to skip a day, you can skip a day. So if you want to feed on demand, you can feed, and it'll take that cube, drop it immediately, and take it out of the rotation. So you'll know, okay, I have one less. So my scheduling is going to go a little shorter. Nice. We also doing things like what I'm doing right now. I've been listening to feedback from mostly the reef community, and so many people were like, "I feed 7 full cubes a day."
Wow.
That's a lot of food. And they're like, yeah, do you have anything bigger? So based on that, we actually have taken the controller and we're making it so it's able to control 2 separate freezers. So you're effectively doubling the capacity from 7 full cubes to 14 full cubes, which I didn't think there'd be that sort of demand for it. But even on the Kickstarter, the second we actually announced that option, I would say we got, I don't know, another 20 backers and people switching themselves from the initial options to the bigger option. And I would never have gotten that if I wasn't asking the community, what do you guys need? And that's one of the things like I really like about this platform, is I'm able to make changes and take in all the ideas that people have and incorporate it into the design that I already have.
Oh, that's so awesome, man! And looking at the some of the pictures that you have on here, so the feeding little like catch cuppy spoon guy, like that's genius, because I just would have thought you would just have it dunk straight into the tank, but you actually have it drop, what is it, like a 3-inch drop, and it actually then is held on this, like spoon that has holes it looks like there's 2 different styles, so that the food can then slowly disperse from the top of the tank, very much like a worm feeder cone for people on the freshwater side. That's kind of what's happening here underneath your unit. Like each little cube is getting caught, and then that's just like, man, that's some next level genius stuff right there, to like really make sure like one hog of the tank isn't coming and just swallowing the cube. It's really dispersing it out.
Yes. So we've called that the cube catcher. And the cube drops out and falls in that little mesh holder you saw on there. And as it defrosts, it allows it to flow out into the tank without, like you said, one big hog just eating the whole cube by itself. It also, I know they have these with freshwater as well, but with the cubes in there just floating around all free, it can go down one of the overflows and all the food's essentially wasted. So that's an important feature. We also have some people that don't want one of these units just sitting on the rim of their tank. They're really going for that minimalist look on the top. We have a base station that will allow you to place the unit in like a cabinet below and feed through like a 1/2-inch tube using a Venturi slurry technology. It's nothing new, but we just applied it to this to this device.
Wow, that's crazy. Do you have any pictures of that available?
I just put that on our latest update. I did a little video update on the Kickstarter. So I kind of show what it looks like, and I explain how it works. I can explain how it works right now if you want. So it's basically a dock. The unit sits right on top of it, and it drops the food into a bigger port where water is being fed through in the slurry portion. So it's basically a Y off of a pump where a controlled amount of water goes in and defrosts the cube, with also a Venturi tube coming out the exit, which will suck that defrosted food and water out into your line essentially. And you can either feed that into a return pump, and so the pump will just basically spray the food all over the tank, which is ideal when you have a lot of, like, especially a bigger fish that kind of hogs the area that the food is dropped. Or you can, if you don't want to use your return pump, you can feed it just straight up to the tank with a separate line and do it that way.
Wow, that's very cool. I never would have thought like that being a thing, because looking at it right now, I mean, what are the dimensions of the auto feeder right now?
The auto feeder are 4 inches square, so 4x4, and then 3.5 inches tall.
That's not too bad.
So the let me see, the dock I have right here.
I mean, considering the DIY options on the internet are basically a dorm fridge.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was the goal for me, was like I didn't have a space to put a dorm fridge, and I wasn't going to put a dorm fridge just in my living room next to the aquarium. Even if I wasn't married, I wouldn't do that. So the dock itself is 5 inches by basically 5 inches and another 2 inches tall. So you'll add that size with the dock. So it's not much bigger than the unit itself.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as like I guess walk me through the Kickstarter, how that is going to work for somebody. So we'll have links to your website and the Kickstarter in the show notes, so people can just directly link to it and check it out themselves, which I would highly encourage, because this thing is like super cool looking. It's innovative, and this is what I love. Like, you know, when people with the technology that we have, like when the hobbyist creativity is just unleashed, you get cool stuff like this, and you know, everybody benefits. So even if you're not going to sign up for the Kickstarter, like, go check it out, give it some love, give it some shares. You know, shout out to Amazonas Magazine. Like, that's how I found out about you. My email feed popped up, and it had like this little, you know, 1 or 2 paragraph blurb about this, you know, frozen food auto feeder. And I'm like, that's awesome. I need to try to talk to this guy. And sure enough, we were able to make something happen. But no, this is super cool. So the Kickstarter is, if you sign up for it, would you get is it a 3D printed model that you're potentially signing up to receive, or would you get a production?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, let me that's been a misconception that is pretty hard to dispel, because all the pictures are of a 3D printed model. So basically the way the whole Kickstarter program works is, and this is something that scares some people away, is you're pledging to get one of these units, and a lot of the Kickstarters in the past and the other crowdfunding services, all it is an idea. Somebody has a great idea, and they haven't even tried to do it yet. So you're paying this money for something that doesn't even exist, and just hoping that they'll get it done for you. I've backed a couple campaigns where I never got anything, and it definitely scares people away. But the difference here with what I've done is I've already done all the groundwork. I've built one myself. I've built multiple myself. I could technically ship a 3D printed Arduino controlled unit to each person that backs it, but that's not what I'm going to do. The point of Kickstarter is for me to get a mass production process going, where it's all going to be injection molded, like sleek looking product, like anything else that you would buy in any store. Another team of engineers is going to look at everything I've done and make sure it's safe to plug in basically around the world, and take what I've done. Like I said, we use buttons to control ours. I want to take it to a touch screen. That's easy for somebody that specializes in that to do. So all the money that we get from the Kickstarter goes to taking this product from a 3D printed, I would say, proof of concept, to a polished, refined, high-end product that you can trust to run your tank, or run the feeding process of your tank for as long as you have it plugged in. That
sounds completely reasonable to me. And so we're talking, and in case that was muffled, I said reasonable. So let's see here. I had my hand over my mouth while I'm talking. I'm just like I'm sitting here like thumbing through, looking at the Kickstarter page and all the pictures, and so my hand's like naturally in front of my mouth, which is just really good etiquette for a podcast host. So anybody out there looking to start one, make sure you cover your mouth with your hand. And so let's talk about the different levels then. So you've got $219, is that going to be like kind of the retail price of this thing when it does launch, or is that like okay? So walk us through.
It's going to be a little more pricey than that when we actually launch. That's part of the draw of backing the Kickstarter, is you're getting it for a discounted price. Like the cube catcher will be an accessory. It detaches from the unit. So the base station, I haven't settled on my exact retail prices yet, but it's going to be more than what you're seeing on the Kickstarter. So you're saving money backing now as opposed to waiting when we start production, which is one of the draws of these crowdfunding campaigns. And that's and aside from that, you're supporting something brand new that doesn't exist yet. But yeah, so like you said, the bottom tier is at $219. That's the base unit with the cube catcher. And that's what you get. That's all you really need. It'll come with whatever mounting system you request when we start fulfilling all the orders, and whatever size wheel that you request. So like if you want to feed full size cubes, you get the full size wheel. If you want to feed half cubes, you get the half wheel. If you want to feed smaller cubes than that, you can get the I think we said nano wheel on there, or pico wheel for the smallest size, which would be like a quarter size cube more or less, and you get a lot of feeds with that. If you have like a 10-gallon tank or a 20-gallon tank, that's what you'd use.
No, that's super cool. What would you guess would be your retail price come when you're actually putting this thing on the shelves or fulfilling orders?
Probably for the base unit, without any accessories, I'm guessing around $250.
So that seems very reasonable to me. Like that seems like if somebody were to be like, hey Randy, guess how much this thing would cost? Oh yeah, it's kind of coming from the saltwater side of things. I feel like I would have threw like a $349 or like a somewhere in like the $300 price point, but yeah, I mean, if that's what you're saying, like that seems like a pretty good bargain for what this thing is.
Yeah, I think we really wanted to make it available to people that need it, and I think we priced it at very, very reasonably. It does a lot. There's also a new feature that was actually suggested by one of the manufacturers I'm talking to. He actually just was like, why don't you add this? And I was like, well, because it's probably too expensive. He's like, no, it's not that expensive, and that would be a live streaming camera. Ooh. So you can, if you're out of town, you can take a look and be like, oh, my fish ate today, and you won't have to just trust that the fish are eating. You'll actually see verification and maybe get some cool pictures along the way, cool video of your fish eating. So that's not being promised yet, but if what the manufacturer said was true, that's something that I'll add into all the packages at no extra charge. And I think that they have like, I don't know if you've heard of the Furbo, but it's like a little camera for your house that shoots out dog treats. And
no,
and
I haven't heard of that yet. That's funny.
We got one for Christmas actually, a year or so ago, and it's kind of cool. Like it actually launches the dog treat out about 5 feet, and it's got a camera, and you can talk to your dog through it. And that's kind of what I envisioned. I was like, oh, that is kind of a cool feature to actually see that they're getting what you're giving.
See, I feel like you have to be. I feel like you have to have a lab or a golden retriever, or else that's not going to work. Because my pug would freak out if we start to like. Because I've done that before with our Ring camera. Like you say, "Hey Zoe," and she starts barking like crazy and won't stop barking for 30 minutes.
Yeah. It doesn't work for my dog either.
That's so funny.
He sees those black magic treats hit the ground. He's like, I'm not touching that.
Nice.
Came out of some robot. So
let's so I guess 2 questions would be, one, like Gen 2, would you have app control, so your Android iPhone controls for this thing, and the second would be, like right now it seems like you're offering a crazy large amount of color options. Being a guy from the supply chain side of things, like, you know, that many colors, that many more SKUs, or do you think you're going to skinny that color choice down when you actually go production?
Yes, I think that probably there's been some that have been, there's been no demand for some of the color choices. For instance, the prototype colors, the like tan and black, I probably won't do that color. So yeah, once we get the orders from everybody, when we're ready to fulfill all the backers, we'll kind of figure out what we got a lot of and what we didn't, and there is a chance that we're going to skinny that down. That was also kind of based on, if we did go with like a high-end 3D printed model, it's very easy to do like 5 of one color and 10 of another, but just talking to manufacturers, it's just a little difficult to do it that way. So
yeah, I mean, if I saw this unit in all black, I would think it was sleek, and like that's just what it's supposed to be. Like that kind of, like this kind of equipment in my head should just be a sleek black unit that, you know, sits on top of your tank or off to the side or something like that.
Which is probably where we're going to take it. There are people that really love their color schemes in the reefing side of things. Like they like to hot rod out their tanks. and it's very important to them to have several colors. So if we do a few colors and we make the parts, maybe 2 or 3 colors, make the parts compatible with each other, obviously, then we can get a couple different color, like dual color schemes in there as well. But yes, after committing more to a injection molded route, like you said, that going with like 20 color options is going to be a little bit more difficult. So.
Did you get a chance to touch on the app support?
Yes, actually the same person that suggested the camera said, well, why don't we just do an app for it too? And I was like, well, because isn't that going to cost a fortune? And they're like, well, not necessarily. So I haven't advertised that that'll be available. That is the goal. I would like to have it app controlled, because I think that's the future of everything, is being able to, especially like if you're out of town and you didn't program it and you want to just feed every day, you can do that. You can check your phone and be like, oh, okay, I have 2 more days left before this is empty, in case you forgot. I think the app would be, it's definitely a goal. There's another little slew of certifications you need once you make something wireless and able to transmit. So that's something I'm not promising to anyone. It'll just be a bonus if we go that route in the middle of the fulfilling.
But I mean, to me though, with everything that you have with the campaign of what is being included, like the controller and the amount of customization and how you can schedule everything out, like that seems like more than I would have expected. So, app control aside, and to be fair, like I've tested some product that we've got that are, Wi-Fi enabled, Bluetooth enabled, and the apps are dog poop. And so like that's something you really want to slow roll, maybe tap your brother, was it Drake Hunter? We'll tap Drake again, see if we can get him in here and do some real good app designing. But like the last thing you want to do is just like throw out, oh yeah, we've got an app and it's dog poop. It's like that's
I do not. I have like some Christmas lights that have this terrible app that it just, the feature looks really, really cool in the store, and then you get home and download the app and you're like, what is this?
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. It's not intuitive. When I worked at Amazon, there were whole teams that were dedicated to human perception, human manipulation of apps and buttons, and just studying layouts. And there's like the Amazon app, we may think that it's like super simple, but there's so much that goes behind button placement and text and font and color. Like it is a science in and of itself. Like it literally like I'm pretty sure it is a major in colleges, like just the human machine interface.
It is. You could definitely major, and I don't know what it's called, but there's a whole careers that are 6-figure careers that design apps for people. And that's why I'm not going to put something on this that is like what we've been discussing, where it's like you get this great product and then you open up the app and you're like, what, a 3rd grader made this. So no, I want it to look good, like any other app you'd get on the App Store that is a reputable app.
So I see right now that the Kickstarter, we've got 19 days to go. I know personally that, the way the consumption of this podcast goes, some people that are just listening into the podcast, they're just joining for the first time. They've got like a week worth of podcast backlog before they may hit this episode and it being relevant to them. So with 19 days to go as of November 14th, like what happens if you don't hit the $40,000 goal? Is the Kickstarter going to get expanded? Like, will you extend the days out? Are you able to just go and continue to do what you can with the 28,000 that you currently have?
No, I'll explain that right now. It's an all or nothing is the way Kickstarter. The reason I went with Kickstarter to begin with is there's a couple other crowdfunding platforms, and Kickstarter really verifies that you actually you don't have like some vapor product that doesn't exist. They made me send them several videos of the product working before they'd even list it. And it's an all or nothing platform. So if I don't hit 40,000 in the next 19 days, all the money goes back to I don't think anybody's charged actually until the end of the campaign. But if it doesn't go there, it just basically disappears. And so if that is what happens, I've been contacted by several companies that want to buy this. I've wanted to stay independent and give people another choice basically, instead of one of the big companies. So that's basically what will happen. If we don't hit the goal, I'm pretty sure we will hit the goal. Usually, I've done some research because there's been a little bit of a plateau here in the middle. Most of the campaigns get a big push at the end, and I've got a lot of people watching, so I'm hoping that that's what's going to happen here. But if it doesn't, we've got plans. People will still be able to buy this. It'll just be probably a longer wait and from a different company.
Gotcha. But at least at some point it will. I mean, it may not
Yeah.
be your ideal way to proceed, but at least there is hope in the future that this thing will still come to market.
For 100%, it will still come to market, just either more expensive and from a different company, and most likely longer wait period.
Yeah, because I mean, if it does go to another company, I mean, they're going to have to put something on it so that they make money. Which it's still coming to market, so that's good, so people can still buy it. But hey, everybody out there listening to the Aquarius podcast, if this is something you're interested in, you got to jump on it. It's 19 days. So this episode will drop on Monday. So what is that? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we'll have like 16 days to go. So hopefully people listen to this, go check out the Kickstarter. If this is something that you're interested in, pledge some money. You're almost there. It's what, 12K?
Yeah, we're almost there. I think we're going to make it. Like I said, the last typically, because I did some research on this, because we did hit a plateau in the middle, and I was like, what's going on here? We were so strong at the beginning. And typically with these crowdfunding campaigns, and it makes sense to me, people will wait till the last few days to actually commit to buying it, just to kind of see where it's at. And so a lot of these campaigns will get another 25 to 40% of their backers on the last 72 hours. So we're still talking to everybody we can. Every day I find people that have never heard of this, and they're like, oh, I need one of these things. And so it's amazing that I felt like the word was getting out there pretty well, but there's still a lot of people that just haven't even seen it.
Yeah, well, that's awesome that Amazon has picked it up, because I mean that's probably the most popular tropical fish magazine, freshwater magazine in the United States right now, and I'm pretty sure it's of German origins, and they've got a very strong presence in Europe. So hopefully you get a ton more interest. And anybody on the fence that's kind of like being a watcher, like, get off the fence and go ahead and back this thing.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah, that was amazing. They were, and I just sent them some info about it. I was like, hey, is this something you guys would be interested in? And they said, yeah, of course we would, and immediately wrote a great piece on it. And I was like, wow, you guys did a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, and hopefully, maybe there's some YouTubers out there that might want to try to have you on and put you in front of their audience as well, and help spread the word, and try to beat this 19 days to go. How long has this thing been going on for?
Since Halloween. I actually launched it on Halloween.
Okay. So it hasn't been. So what do they give you? Like a 30-day window? Is that what we're?
No, they give you up to 90 days. I could do 90 days if I wanted to, but most successful campaigns are between 30 and 40 days. So I did like 34 days. Okay. Also because I promised that I've had a crowd of people that have kind of been following me since I kind of went public with this in late July. And I promised that we would start the funding in October. And like I said, Kickstarter really I was impressed by how well they actually verified that I had a product. But it delayed me like a week or two in actually starting the campaign, because they had to review videos and then talk to me and then review more videos. And so I'm still happy that I went with Kickstarter, but it did push my plans of launch. I wanted to launch like mid-October. I ended up launching on, like I said, on Halloween. So that's when I started. It's going to end December 4th, I believe. But yeah, I'm confident we're gonna get through it.
December 4th at 9:58 a.m. PST, so Pacific time. So everybody out there, that's your deadline. It's all or nothing. So you gotta make it happen.
Good. We'll give the East Coasters a little more time.
Yeah, there you go. No, Erik, man. I mean, I already feel so vested just talking to you for an hour, man. That you've come on the podcast. We've talked about your origins, talked about the creation of this thing. Like, I want to see you. I want everybody that wants this thing. Everybody is like, I need, like, all you saltwater people. You guys love gadgets. You love spending money on gadgets for your hobby. This seems like an absolute no-brainer of something that you would want on your tank. Like, how could you not?
Yeah, it's something that has been missing for a long time, and I would have 100% probably paid more than I'm asking for this if this existed when I needed it. Yeah,
because people ask Corey all the time, like, what are some of the best fish foods, and we'll go ahead and say, the ones that these we'll throw out a couple that we carry on our website, you know, that you can buy. But then we also say, and frozen food like bloodworms, brine shrimp, like all of these amazing frozen foods, you know, that we don't sell. We sell it in a retail store, but you know, we have a reach across the country and across the world, and so there's no monetary gain for us to promote frozen foods. It's just the plain and simple truth that frozen food is great to feed to your community fish. It's great to feed to, you know, to your fish in general, especially if you've got a fidgety eater or a picky eater that won't eat everything. And so this, you know, this being something that, you know, if you work long hours, if you're a nurse doing 12-hour shifts, if you're, you know, any of these professions where you have these extended, you know, time periods, and you get home and, you know, it's your dark period for your tank, but you wanted to make sure your fish are getting fed. And then also the vacation scenario, like the most obvious one of, you go on vacation, you don't want your fish to starve. You don't want to play that game of, I think they can make it. You know, Bob looks a little chubby today. I think he can go like 7 days without eating.
Yep.
You know,
or I hope Bob doesn't eat Sally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, we spend a lot of time and a lot of money on our hobby, and you know, for a couple $100, if you know, this gives you that extra peace of mind and everything that you've put into this, like this isn't just some, you know, some poorly thought out product. Like you've put a lot of time and a lot of thought into this thing.
Yeah, I definitely want to see it succeed, and that's one of the things. Like before I even started the Kickstarter, I could have done this, like I said. Well, I would have had to use a different funding platform, but I could have done it with just the idea. And I thought it was very important that I had a proven device, that I had faith in myself before I started trying to sell it to anybody else. So that's right now all we're waiting for is just to make it a refined, nice packaged product you'd see on the shelf of any store.
For sure. And the fact that you're also a fellow San Diego State Aztec alumni,
yep,
Eric, like myself. Yep. So I want to see, got to see an Aztec doing real well.
Yeah. I mean, San Diego misses you. So,
so when I left, and viewers are going to hate me for this, but when I left, they opened up Puestos in Seaport Village. Oh, that place is so good, man. I went back there for a buddy's wedding, and I asked a friend, like, what's the place I have to go to eat at? And they're like, was Puestos here when you were here? I'm like, nope, that's where you need to go. And I hate waiting in line for food. That place is so worth it.
Yeah, that place is lit. The margaritas are great. The food's also great. They've had a couple of those opened up now, but yeah,
nice.
I think they have a second one here in San Diego. I don't know where else they are, but nice. Yeah, they're delicious.
And now I need to go to San Diego for some Puestos tacos. Awesome. All right, well, Erik Hunter, man, this has been a fantastic episode. Thank you so much. I mean, I think we've hit like the hour mark, so I hope everybody out there, they enjoyed, you know, learning more about who you are, you know, learning about us talking about saltwater versus freshwater differences. I didn't necessarily think we were going to go down that route, but we did, and I think it was great. And man, your product, the Af4, the Af4, the auto frozen fish food feeder, so cool, man. And I want to see you do really well with this, and I want to see you hit that goal. So everybody go check this out if this is something you're interested in. Back this Kickstarter, man. You've heard Erik talk for an hour. Well, me and Erik talk for an hour. I hope you're as vested into this and want to see him succeed like I do. So Erik, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Randy. I'm really happy to be here, and this was a great talking to you. I'm glad I learned more about freshwater, the freshwater side of it. Wasn't what I expected to do either, but I'm glad that we talked about it.
Yeah, you learn something every day, don't you?
Yep.